The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
I guess I got something that has happened to me in the fall related to boats, because every time the fall rolls around, for some reason, I start looking at these boat things. Like the whole
Tommy Thompson.
Yeah, the whole series of Deep Gold, like looking at that, which is, I was thinking there'd be movement on it. There is this documentary that kind of petered out. And you had been the one who pointed me at the Amy Bradley case, who's like, she's like this early 20s girl on a boat that, in all likelihood, accidentally or on purpose fell from or jumped from a boat.
Right. And literally this year, a docuseries came out about how her family's still waiting for her to come home. And I'm like, how is that possible?
Right. And so that had all taken place back in 1998, but it got me like going down this rabbit hole, and I started pulling out these facts. Did you know that since 2000, and this is a big number, 208 people have gone missing from cruise ships?
Since when now?
2000.
So in 25 years?
Yeah, so it doesn't even include Amy Bradley.
Do they continue to be missing?
Yeah. Like there's that.
No, I did not know that.
Now I'm not just saying U.S. cruise ships when I say that number.
Yeah, I have no, I know that it's uncommon, but I mean, that seems like maybe it's not so uncommon.
Right. So 52 of them disappeared from Carnival Cruise Lines around the world. And I thought that was high. And then I started digging into that number, and I came up with some confirmation of that. And I started kind of drilling down through them. I think we've talked about this before, and I know part of this. I did my internships with Disney many years ago, like seriously, 30 something. It's a really long time ago. And one of the things that happened, while I was doing my internships, is Disney was preparing to enter, I guess you call it, the industry of cruise ships. They were going to be launching their boats. The summer that I first worked for them, there were these drawings in one of the places I worked that were all about the design of either one or two of the boats. And sure enough, in the years after that, they built the boat, and I think it finally launched, and I went looking for that. So that Disney boat, that was I guess the first one or the second one, it launched in February of 1998. So it was a month before Amy Bradley went missing. February 23rd, and she goes missing March 24th-ish. And I thought that was interesting that had happened. And, like you said, the docuseries just came out on Amy Bradley. I ended up going down a rabbit hole related to that Disney cruise ship that I was just talking about. And it was called the Disney Wonder. And Disney Wonder is pretty interesting. I pulled up a few facts on it. Oh, well, here's one to contradict what I just said. It says it's the second ship. Okay, so Disney Magic is the first ship. Disney Wonder is the second ship. And it enters service in 1999, but it launches on February 23rd, 1998. I was right about that part. So its sister ship, Disney Magic, was first, and then Disney Wonder was second. Then they have four other ships: Disney Dream, Disney Fantasy, Disney Wish, and Disney Treasure. So I learned a bunch about cruise ships, like chasing this down. I just thought it was interesting that one of the cases we had was tied to Disney, which fascinates me. Disney is a very interesting company in terms of when crimes and accidents and mysterious things happen. They are the first type of company that will put their fist down, open their wallet, and make it go away.
Right, because it's very damaging.
Yeah, they're a huge brand, and it would damage this massive brand that is the Walt Disney Company.
Correct, and it's built on family entertainment and fun and safety.
Right, right. So we have the Disney Wonder decorated in Art Nouveau style and Disney Magic decorated in Art Deco style. And I had to actually go look those two things up. And even now, as I'm sitting here, I could not give you a very good explanation as to how they're different.
Dude, I know exactly what you're talking about.
What
I
I
know
said?
exactly what each one of them means.
So Art Nouveau is more German, is that right?
Well, I don't know. I have these mugs.
And they have...
And one of them is clearly the Black Noir.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And the other one is clearly the other thing.
Okay, so Art Nouveau, Art Deco.
Okay. And it's the style. Like,
Right.
Is it more curly and elegant and simple, or is it like
Right.
loud and bold and crazy?
Right, so that's how they differentiate between these two ships. That's the only real difference.
I knew, and that's funny because I never realized that they had segmented it off like that. But like, everybody, I assume everybody's been to Disney World, and the cruise line is just an extension of Disney World, right?
Yeah.
As far as it's a boat that has brought a little bit of Disney onto it. And they segment things off like that because you've got two different styles of people, right?
Yeah.
That are looking for souvenirs. And that's how they kind of broke it down. I think there's more than two at this point, but it's just the different styles that they use. One would be more loud and boisterous, and one is more simple and elegant.
Right. And so other than that, these first two boats are pretty similar. And I want to go over some of those facts so that people can understand this. Because we're talking about these, like the size of cruise ships, I think that matters. And I think I have limited experience personally with like cruise ships and that industry of getting on a boat and just riding around in a circle and coming back to where you just were. I have limited experience with that, but I looked it up and I think I have a pretty good understanding. So I wanted to know how big are these ships. And both of these boats, the Wonder and the Magic, they have 11 full-size public decks. They can accommodate 2,400 passengers. They each have 875 public staterooms, and they have a crew of somewhere between 925 and 1,010 people. That's large. The length of these boats is around 300 meters, so they're almost 1,000 feet long. And they move along like cruising speed, which we talked about recently. It's around 25 miles per hour, give or take. The max speed is 23 and a half knots, so that's around 27 miles per hour. And
I think it's safe to say that like it's way bigger than like you would think.
Yeah. It's like I try and say that this is how I'll put it out there for people. Imagine a football field that is 13 stories high. So that's the size boat these things are. They're enormous. And while I was aware that like Disney was getting into boats, like once I left Disney, I had done 2 internships with them, really specific type internships, and I didn't really stay in that like line of work, and I didn't stay with that company. So I kind of just the whole Disney Magic thing just kind of fell away from me, and I didn't know like they had this many boats or that they did all this stuff. In fact, the last time I really remember hearing about any Disney cruise ships was during the pandemic, when they had a bunch of passengers get off in March 2020 over in California somewhere. They had people get off and they were testing them for COVID. Remember how that became a huge deal when boats were kind of incubators for this stuff?
I remember that. Yep.
So they were checking all these people, and within like a month or two, they had a bunch of people who had tested positive for COVID, and that's really the last thing that entered my mind about a Disney cruise ship. Even though I hadn't probably thought of them in 25 years when that happened, but today's story is tied to this boat, the Disney Wonder. Now, it also happens in March. It happens March 21st, but it's many years. It's 13 years after the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. It's March 21st, 2011. A 24-year-old woman, so around the same age. Her name is Rebecca Corium. She goes missing from a cruise ship. And at first I kind of looked at it and I was like, I don't know if there's enough to cover that. But I found these old Guardian articles where this guy, John Ronson, which I know it's not the greatest source, but it's a long time ago. He like gets on this boat in October 2011. So, the fall season, and like goes for a ride to see if he can figure out what happened to this woman. And he writes about it for the Guardian in this massive piece. So when I saw that, and I saw some of the other stuff that was available on Rebecca's case, I was like, let me dig into this. Well, I started finding these websites in archive form. There was one that was called Find Rebecca. There were multiple like different pieces of coverage in sort of cruise news outlets, and like she occasionally pops in mainstream media, but really from the perspective of like, Disney lost a person on a boat, and like they had to settle this lawsuit and whatever. So that's how it pops. And looking at it like in a glancing overview, I was like, well, what happened to her? It's sort of the opposite of Amy Lynn Bradley. Because like Amy Lynn Bradley, I look at that and I'm like, oh yeah, she either jumped or she fell and she died. And that's like it for me. She's not coming back, not going to be, sitting somewhere on a tropical beach. She also was not trafficked or anything like that. So I started digging in and I wanted to know more about Rebecca Corium, which is how we get here today.
And she was a worker, right?
She is a cast member for Disney. So technically, she's a crew member because she's on a boat, but Disney's employees are known as cast members.
Which is one of the first big differences, right?
Right. It's one of the first big differences. So she was born March 11th, 1987. She grew up in Chester. Chester is like a little city on the River Dee over in England. I think it's along the border with Wales, but I could be told I'm wrong on that, and I would get it. She had a sister. She had her parents, and she had two foster brothers. Goes to high school. Everybody says like these things about people that tend to like build them up. She kind of has some of that stuff. She worked at the zoo. She was a volunteer.
Yeah, it's the past revered. Yep.
Yeah. From what I understand, while she was a teenager, she joined what's known as the Air Cadets. She went to Plymouth University and studied sports science, which, if I recall correctly, that's what Amy Lynn Bradley was studying. So I know I'm just throwing it out there. It's a random thing to have in common. She ended up getting the staff volunteer position within the Air Cadets, which kind of reads like either Explorers or ROTC to me. She participates in like their stuff. She had undertook youth studies at Liverpool Hope University, which read to me like she was combining the sports science with the ability to become a coach or a teacher. And she ends up coming to the U.S. for 4 months to teach sports at this place called Camp America, which is up in Maine. In June of 2010, she goes to London. She has this Disney cruise job interview, which everything with Disney is sort of a spectacle and an occasion. And I remember even for internships for me in the 90s, like the interviews were a spectacle. And so she gets hired. She comes over to the U.S. again. She goes through training at the theme parks. And she spends about 4 months on cruises that are going out to the Bahamas, which if I understand correctly, all of the Disney cruise ships are registered out of the Bahamas. She gets her 2 months off and she goes home to England. She comes back to work on the Disney Wonder. And at the time that she comes to work on it, it's based out of the port of Los Angeles. So it's on the West Coast. She visits all of the ports of call along the Mexican Riviera. She goes through the Panama Canal. She ends up going home to her hometown, like to Chester, for 2 weeks. And we know this because she goes to attend a funeral. According to her family and according to all the sources I found, this is the last time anybody sees her in person, like from her family. She goes back to Disney Wonder, and it looks like she is sort of a sports / daycare person on the boat. And she's really there working with kids. She keeps in touch with her family on Facebook and on Skype, but she's not going to see them. She keeps in touch with her family on Facebook and on Skype, but she's not going to go home and see them again before this next part happens. So the ship leaves Los Angeles, if I'm understanding everything. And one of the summaries screwed this up a little bit, so I'm going to read the sentence and then you and I are going to sort it. It says, on the day the ship left Los Angeles, 6 weeks later, the 21st of March 2011, she sent what would be her last message to her parents via Facebook to tell them she would call them the next day. And this comes out of the Chester Chronicle, which would be the hometown paper for Rebecca Corrigan. And the Los Angeles Times has reprinted this statement. And I'm at least two internet sources say this. On the day the ship left Los Angeles 6 weeks later, the 21st of March 2011, she sent what would be her last message to her parents via Facebook to tell them she would call them the next day. My understanding is the ship leaves Los Angeles, and then 6 weeks later is the 21st of March 2011. And she's talking to her parents on Facebook Messenger saying she's going to call them the next day. And I will be very honest, I do not know if Messenger was a thing yet or if it was just regular old Facebook. Is that how you interpret that?
In 2011, Facebook Messenger was a thing, and that is how I interpreted what was being said there. As far as the March date was 6 weeks after it had left Los Angeles. It's a weird way to say it, but whatever.
Yeah, I get the impression that there might be some Welsh and English people following this case and keeping up the summaries online, and they interpreted it a couple different ways. And I think somebody just picked up a sentence that was in the process of being structured somewhere and ran with it. But like I said, that comes from the Chester Chronicle. It's repeated in the Los Angeles Times. The Wikipedia had it. Several sources on Reddit had that. So I wanted to make sure that we're clear on all of that. I believe she's been on the boat for 6 weeks. Her mother becomes concerned because she says back to Rebecca, all right, we'll talk to you then. She doesn't hear from her. And then 12 hours go by with no response. So at 9 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, the Wonder is off the coast of Mexico, bound for Puerto Vallarta and Cabo San Lucas. Rebecca does not show up for work. So someone starts to look for her just from the perspective of, hey, is everything okay? Got to come to your shift. And you're on a boat. It's not like, you went somewhere.
I was going to say, that's a whole different kind of sick day, right?
Right. So that's one of the reasons this is also interesting to me, by the way, is because it is a completely encapsulated world out there. It's very contained. So they look around. She's not in her room. She's not on the boat. So they page her over the ship's public address system, which is basically someone is able to make an announcement, and speakers in the hallways and various public places will carry that announcement, kind of like when you're in school and you would hear the announcements in the morning. So they don't get a response to this page. And when they don't get a response to that, someone in security starts reviewing the CCTV footage. And I think you can see this a couple different places online. So the CCTV footage shows an appearance of her supposedly at 5:45 in the morning. Now, another purported recounting of what happened from a crew member has, and this is not verified. I noticed several places say this, but they say it's not verified. They claim that someone saw her going overboard at 3 a.m., but then we have this video at 5:45 a.m. So I'm just putting that out there. Rebecca is seen talking on one of the phones that are like in-house phones. Have you been on a cruise?
I've never been on a cruise. I more than likely will never go on a cruise.
Have you ever worked somewhere where you could pick up the phone and talk to somebody in another place in the same building? Okay.
Yeah.
They have these phones on the wall that you can like grab. You can't dial out on them, but you can get to a central location and potentially.
I'd say that most phones on a cruise ship probably are like that, given the nature of what a cruise ship is.
Right. It's kind of like a hotel on water. So think of it from that perspective. Like this is a phone you can pick up that'll take you to the front desk, and then they can potentially direct you to another room if you need it. Or you can pick it up and dial a specific like 3 or 4 digit extension and get a particular room. So she's talking on one of those in this video. And the description of her is that she is distraught. Someone walks up to her and appears to say something like, "Is everything okay?" She talks to them. It appears that she just acknowledges that she is okay. She hangs up the phone and walks away, pushing her hair back. She puts her hands in her pockets. And friends and family seeing this video say that all of the things happening in this video seem like the Rebecca Corium they know. Nothing else documents Rebecca being alive and potentially still on this boat anywhere since this moment of CCTV footage at 5:45 a.m. So she's just gone. The next thing that's going to happen is the crew looks for her on the boat, and they end up notifying both the U.S. Coast Guard and the Mexican Navy that they need to look for her. And there's an unsuccessful search in essentially the local and international waters along the way. And they're basically backtracking from where the Wonder is at the time she's reported missing or doesn't show up for her shift back to the point that she's seen on the boat. And they're trying to figure out where the boat would have been. Now, the Disney Wonder is registered out of the Bahamas, and I mentioned that a little earlier on. So that means the people who are going to investigate this are going to come out of the RBPF. So the RBPF, which I had no idea existed before I started reading about this, they operate with the Bahamian Ministry of National Security. From what I can tell, they're kind of the FBI of the Bahamas. They have like, instead of a director, they have a commissioner who heads them up. This is all incredibly fascinating to me. They're a member of Interpol. They have all the things that you would come to think of in our national law enforcement. So, and I'm going to say this, and like, I think people understand. It's like the FBI, the DEA, ATF, and like the FBI's like hostage response team, all operating in one agency. And they coordinate with like DEA and the FBI. You can go and read a little bit about them online. It's pretty interesting. They're a non-military force. And the idea is they are taking care of major crimes for the Bahamas. So a detective is flown to the ship, and it's their job to investigate it once the boat has returned. So by the time this happens and we get this detective on board, 3 days have passed. According to various accounts of what he was doing, including an article in the Bahamas Weekly published in March of 2012. He is reported to have been on the boat for almost a week. And according to Rebecca's family, they fly the parents out from England. They meet the ship. They meet the detective. He tells them he's only been there for a day and then he's headed back home. Not that detectives have to be completely honest about everything that goes on, but it's a little dubious. He seems to have indicated to the family that he was only able to interview a few crew members and he did not talk to anyone on the passenger side. Now, this is where it gets a little Disney and a little conspiratorial. There are claims that Disney picks them up, puts them in a car that has blacked out windows, brings them on board through like a secret entrance, and they only do it after the passengers have disembarked. I don't know if this is limited to the detective or limited to the family. I've seen it reported both ways. I'm not sure which one is true. I have a feeling it's probably both of those people are treated that way. And I think that's like where the wrong turn really happens in all of this, because we kind of looked for that in the Amy Bradley case. But I think here, with it, Disney being Disney, kind of organized capitalism at its best, imitation of organized crime, they don't want anything to damage their brand. And I think they probably screwed this up.
Well, I mean, if that's what I'm not really sure, like if they felt that way when it was happening, or if like they looked back and felt that way, because like how should they have been transported? Like, should it have been that different, right?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I follow what
it's
you're saying.
entirely possible that's what happened, but like there was nothing sinister about it. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it's a weird thing to call out. And if you're narrating something that's happened in retrospect and you've already got a skew to it, then everything, you can make everything fit, right? I'm just saying I don't know what happened, but there is this tinge that happens, and it's all geared towards, they say the Disney treatment, because it's basically like we're going to cover up, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know, like, how should they have been brought to the boat? Like,
I don't know. This is a podcast. I'm telling a story. I'm making the sensational points of the point that there's been sensationalism about this. Like, I'm talking about it from the perspective of how people have recounted it, because I'm curious if it means anything or not. Right.
And I would say maybe. I mean, I could see both sides of it, but I can also see where you could make it. You could think to make it mean something that maybe it doesn't.
Right.
They did bring them out, right?
Right. They did. And, I'm sure there's some kind of spin doctor sitting there for Disney whose job is to figure out the troubleshooting of problematic situations and to either write the check or solve the problem, whatever it's going to take to do that. I'm positive that Disney would do that when one of their own cast members disappears from their own boat. So the family talks to Wonder's captain, like to the guy who was in charge of the ship. He gives them condolences. He tells them or indicates to them, the word that I've seen used is expressed. So that sounds like Disney whitewashing it a little bit. But his idea was that she had been washed overboard by a wave while she was at this area known as the crew pool. Her parents don't buy this. They think that the high walls around the pool would have prevented that from happening. After they do this, they have like a little brief tour and they're just whisked away again. And they're taken off to a meeting with Disney executives and whoever that troubleshooter was that they had been speaking to that's arranged all of this to happen. Now, here's where it gets a little strange. The Amy Bradley turn of this particular case is going to be about a year later. On the day before the first anniversary of this, so, it's 2012 when this happens, But there's a email that comes in to Rebecca's father. And this email basically she says, look, I've seen Rebecca out in the wild. She says, I'm 85% sure that last August, so August of 2011, I saw Rebecca with a dark-haired man on the street in Venice. She believes she's seen Rebecca, and she saw the family's website looking for Rebecca, and that's what reminded her. According to Rebecca's uncle, it's all just an email, but he feels like it's legit, and everybody thinks it's legit. And it's upsetting for everyone to think that she could be out there somewhere after all this time. And he wondered how she would have gotten there without using her passport, because they do get her belongings back from her cast members' quarters, and the passport is in there.
Right, and she didn't teleport, right?
Correct.
So doesn't that kind of answer itself? I mean, he says he believes it's legit, but how did she get there?
Oh, I think so. Unless they're talking about Venice, California, and she just got off the boat. That's the only thing I've come up with that might be.
I think that the only time she could have gotten off the boat unnoticed would be specifically when she was missing.
I agree with that. So where I'm back to this, that I have questions, is why do people do this? Claim to see someone they probably could not possibly have seen and claim they're really sure about it.
Okay, so now 85% sure is not really sure, I don't think. I think that it's, I don't think people do it.
Maliciously?
I don't think they're lying.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know for sure. However, clearly, all the paths from where she was last seen, which is apparently on some CCTV footage on the Disney Wonder, somewhere in the ocean, all the paths back to her being spotted in Venice, California or Venice, Italy require a path that doesn't exist.
Right.
Okay. And it is, I'm not going to say ludicrous because I kind of understand the phenomenon involved in why this occurs, because if you have hope that somebody did see her. Now, granted, in 2011, everybody had cell phones.
See, okay, you're where I am too. Go ahead.
So, the very first thing I'm going to do if I see somebody that is being, looked for is I'm going to be taking a picture of that person.
Right.
Like subtly, and I will be providing it to whomever is, looking, like how they send an email. I would send the email with the information as to where, the geotag on it or whatever. And that's what I would do. I wouldn't say one way or the other. However, then you get into this whole thing where if they did see her, doesn't that sort of indicate maybe she doesn't want to be found?
I mean, so you brought the cell phone thing.
Oh, yeah. Take a picture of her.
And taking a picture of her. But not just that. Okay, 1998, the Amy Bradley thing, I would buy that, there is still a chance somebody could get out in the world and, maybe slip through security and maybe not have a way to communicate for a minute and end up in a bad situation. That's not what I think happened with Amy Lynn Bradley. But I could see it happening in 1998 in the circumstances we're presented with here if they were to transport back in time 13 years and happen in 1998. The cell phones aren't just pictures and videos. They're also ways to communicate and locations. Yeah. So in my opinion, it would be infinitesimally harder or more difficult to disappear in 2011. And I know it happens. I know people do disappear, but there's certain things that don't make a lot of sense. Why would you all right, having read through enormous amounts of actual human trafficking. It doesn't happen like this. They don't snatch people off cruise ships. That's incredibly difficult. But one of the key elements in human trafficking cases is the traffickers take passports and identification and debit cards and cell phones. So, like, finding that stuff in her room, she's not being trafficked.
Well, nor did she leave on her own.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think she left on her own.
Well, she would need her passport.
Well, I don't know when the cutoff is for this. It becomes very difficult, in my opinion, after 9/11 to get a false passport. Like, that's the cutoff. So I don't think we're talking about somebody who's existing in a time where she could have afforded like a passport and all of those things.
Not to mention, like, why would she do that?
Well, like, sometimes people really do want to get away. You and I both have, seen
Typically
cases where people are
trace
found.
that. You can typically trace that, though, to, I mean, I would have to say that in the event I wanted to walk away from my life, I'm probably not going to do it on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, so I agree with you there. And I'm also going to say that, like, she had already kind of walked away from her life. So why would she also walk away from her life?
She could always just go back to life, right?
Right. She could go back to life or back to doing whatever. I will say, if something like that had happened, I think someone like her, the way she's presented, would have surfaced again in some way. Like, we would know the ending of the mystery if there was to be one. And I would... Go ahead.
Well, she just went to her grandfather's funeral.
Correct.
And came back. So she was close to her family.
Right.
The very first place she would have gone if she had left the cruise ship would be to her family.
I think so. I mean, I can't... I have to bend my mind too much to come up with a different scenario that she's, like, leaving her life or having some kind of depression or whatever. And we don't have evidence of any of that. We just have the evidence that, like, apparently the passport was there. Like, the parents are pretty outspoken in this case, so we would know if something else had happened. I mentioned that this case ends up getting the attention of John Ronson. So he does dig into this. Like, he goes looking for Rebecca. And so that happens ahead of the whole Venice thing. In October 2011, John Ronson basically gets on the boat. He gets on the boat, takes the ride, sees what he can see. He writes it up. The Guardian does a pretty good job giving him a really good long amount of space. And it's worth a read if you're interested in this case or you're just interested in these type cruise cases. He peppered tons of facts in here, and I'm in the process of kind of like fact checking him, but like, he's pretty spot on. Like, he's not trying to be super conspiratorial about all of this, but he does see the mystery. And I think part of that mystery comes about with like a little bit of a perfect storm. And then I'll come back to him. The perfect storm is you have a woman from essentially England on a U.S. cruise ship that's registered out of the Bahamas, who is on a Pacific Ocean southward type cruise and ultimately passing through multiple local waters and then international waters creates this sort of cluster of jurisdictional nightmares. Because we've already talked about the fact that we have the Bahamas answer to the FBI, we have the U.S. Coast Guard, we have the Mexican Navy. There's like all these different people involved. And that doesn't even account for the fact that this happens on a Disney boat. Who, for those of you who don't know, Disney has an intense level of corporate security in-house. And if there's something to investigate, they're going to investigate it, if nothing else, from the perspective of how do we cover our ass on this?
They absolutely are going to do that, yes.
So some of what Ronson found could fall into, all right, Disney planted some really good seeds. I found a little summary of what he published. The article itself is fantastic. It's a good read. Unfortunately, it is The Guardian, but still, it's worth reading. The title of his article is Rebecca Corium, Lost at Sea. And it's old, like it's got some age on it, so you'll have to like fact check some stuff if you go down this rabbit hole. But it's worth doing. So basically, the summary on this says in October 2011, Welsh-American journalist and author John Ronson took the Disney Wonder along the same route and made discreet inquiries while aboard. After speaking with Rebecca's family with their permission, he wrote about his experience for The Guardian. Several crew members who had been on the ship at the time of Corium's disappearance, none of whom wanted their names used, spoke to him and suggested that more was known about her fate than Disney or the Bahamian police were publicly admitting. Many were circumspect, with one bartender telling Ronson, "It didn't happen. That's the answer that I have to give." After touring the areas of the ship open to passengers, Ronson decided that Rebecca Corium had probably slipped and fallen while jogging on the Deck 4 jogging track. The railings there were low enough for such an accident to happen. She regularly kept herself in shape by jogging. However, the track was well covered by disguised security cameras. Ronson shared this theory with a deck worker who told him he was mistaken and that Rebecca had actually gone overboard from the crew pool on Deck 5. The worker told him, "I was on the ship that day. Everyone knows." He apparently, to John Ronson, cites that there was a flip-flop discovered in this area and that was thought to be proof. I don't put tons of stock in that, but I'm throwing it out there. John Ronson goes home and he tries to find a woman that the Coriums had told to reach out to him. She had apparently done so under the name Melissa. She told him that the day after Rebecca went missing, the crew had put flowers on the wall near the pool, kind of like a memorial. Don't know if this is accurate information or not. There is a quote from this woman that pops up that says, "It really stirred things up. Why were they putting them there? Nothing was clear." And the summary on Ronson kind of wraps up with, when Ronson took a look at the crew pool visible from the fore of Deck 10, he doubted these claims. Around the railings on the pool is a steel wall high enough to completely block any view, and another crew member had told him it was a popular place to go when not working, as the crew's cabins were very, very small. It was a place where crew members could relax away from guests and the view of guests. According to, go ahead.
Which might be why the crew put a small memorial there.
Because it was the place that they remembered her from?
Well, it's the place that they could go as crew members to chill out.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's
a community space for the crew members. It may have nothing to do with her disappearance.
Right. And it also is away from the guests. They're probably not going to get lambasted too much by their bosses.
See?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So according to Ronson, there were obvious security cameras mounted here. He does say it's possible that like these cameras could have been put up after the fact, like to document this area. He still doesn't see how anyone could have jumped or fallen from this area. And this seems to sort of fuel the fire of the mystery that we were talking about comes about with all of this. The crew members who spoke with Ronson insisted that Rebecca had gone overboard from this area. One of them tells him, "Disney knows exactly what happened. Everything here is taped. There's CCTV everywhere. Disney has this on tape." So near the end of the voyage, another crew member who was looking for him explained in further detail that even though the walls around the pool are high, the seas get rough, and she could have been tossed during a time when everything was rough. And this crew member talks about how the deck and the walls get slippery from the water. The worker said that he had a friend of his, guided employee, inside under similar conditions, and that it was so egregious that they did this. Like basically they were in this area at a time when the seas were rough, that the captain discipline the employee, and Disney made the decision to send that employee home as a risk, meaning they could potentially have become another Rebecca.
What happened?
So he said that they once had like a couple of employees, and this worker that's talking to Ronson knew one of these employees who had brought a friend a particular way to this pool deck.
That was dangerous.
That was dangerous. It gets them in trouble. And that employee gets in enough trouble that the captain disciplines him. And when the captain disciplines him as a risk, Disney sends him packing.
I see. And we don't know, like, if that happened before or after.
No, it just comes up in the course of this article, Rebecca Corium Lost at Sea in The Guardian.
Okay.
It's one of these unnamed workers talking about it to John Ronson. But it's, you know, all of that stuff I think could be planted. But I will say one thing that sounds completely legit to me. If she disappeared from this area, if she disappeared from Disney property, my bet, Disney does have the tape.
I think that's possible, but I would say this. On a cruise ship run by Disney or anywhere else, there's still, especially in 2011, there would have still been some operator involvement in viewing, preserving, maintaining, that kind of thing with the footage.
Yeah, you mean going back to that point in time and like being able to like make sure it doesn't get taped over or deleted or destroyed?
I doubt very seriously that they keep records of all of the footage. Like, I think it would probably be a situation where it was being constantly taped over.
Right.
I think that they probably have security that watches the footage, or they're supposed to be watching the footage.
Right.
So basically, in the event, let's say that something did happen to her and it was caught on camera, if the person that was watching that monitor during that period of time was asleep,
yeah,
they missed it. And like, if there was no like spot, like if they didn't spot it when it happened, depending on the setup, you know, it could be taped over or recorded over by the time they needed it. Because think of the vast amount of information, like completely useless information most of the time, right?
Yes.
That they would having to be storing or like beaming to a satellite to be stored off ship, or you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I follow.
And so I don't really know the stats. We don't have a lot of great stats on stuff that happens on cruise ships. I do believe that there are CCTVs on cruise ships. I also think, at least in 2011, they would have largely relied on security watching things that were happening, as opposed to using it as a point in reference to go back and try and backtrack. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I agree with you. And I also think that like you could be storing so much information that maintenance issues happen. And like that gets a little dubious because like it just happens to be that one camera's out. But it could be that like an entire computer is not working and keeping the footage it's supposed to. It's really just live observations.
Or the guy that was supposed to do it forgot to check the box to keep,
right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So once you get into that realm of things, I really do think, you know, I'm not sure. I do know, though, that for all the things that happen that should have been caught on CCTV in any random circumstance, like the majority of the time, they're not for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, I mean,
weird.
I go through. That's one of the things I go through all the time, particularly with hotels. And I keep comparing this cruise ships to hotels because hotels are what I'm familiar with. And I cannot tell you the number of times that, like, especially today, hotels have moving cameras in certain areas, like lobbies will have stagnant cameras. And if they have a blind spot that the stagnant cameras can't see, they'll have a camera that's a pan zoom tilt camera. And it's
Right.
you can move around with a little controller, and like a little digital controller will take it away from the blind spot for a second. So you could lose things that you don't know you're losing because you're looking at something else.
Well, sure. And I do think that, you're going to have security on cruise ships. And one of the best ways to keep eyes on everything at once would be through monitors,
Yeah.
as opposed to like having people having to walk around, right?
Right.
Which I'm sure there were also people walking around, but that's the best way to keep up with like big things that could happen, like a fire or like, a revolt. I don't know. I don't know what would happen on a cruise ship. That would be bad. But in theory, they would also see somebody fall off, right?
In theory, yeah.
Except if they didn't.
Right. And so that comes up in like the theories portion of the summaries online.
Anytime someone goes missing on a cruise ship, I think it's safe to say that like we've entered the missing person's escape room. Okay. That's what it feels like. Right?
Wait. Describe that, because I like that.
It's like we're going to come up with every possible thing that could have happened except the most logical thing that could happen, right?
I would say that's an accurate description of this case.
And it's avoiding like, the, gigantic elephant on the boat, so to speak.
Right.
Which is, if somebody disappears from a cruise ship and there is literally no trace of them afterwards, I'm not sure why it's so it's like it's not logical, but everybody goes with everything except they fell into the gigantic never-ending ocean surrounding the cruise ship.
Did you ever watch the TV show House?
Yes.
I love that show, and I always think of, I don't know who coined this, but I always think of that show when I think of this phrase. And I think it's a medical phrase, and that's why they have it there. But when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. That is what all of these cruise ship cases sort of remind me of.
Right. But see, the true crime enthusiast, right, which is, again, where this whole escape room thing comes in.
Right.
So missing people from a cruise ship are like the escape room of missing persons cases, because you have to use every single clue and experience that you have, plus a very vivid imagination to figure out what happened to that person, right?
Yep.
When really it's all a facade and they're in the ocean somewhere.
Yeah, like I cannot imagine being a human trafficker and like hearing all these stories about women disappearing from cruise ships or men disappearing from cruise ships and going, you know what? That's the best place that I could possibly find a human trafficking victim. It'd be a boat.
In the event, okay, something happens on a cruise ship where one of the traditional motives for murder causes a murder to occur, right?
Yeah.
Love, money, revenge, right? Something happens, somebody dies. And you get into this mode where you've got to, get all these crazy circumstances lined up where, like, they're being taken off in a suitcase. They're, what's happening to the person, right? The problem is they say that, oh, if she'd gone off, they would have seen her go off. Well, if she had been murdered, they would have seen her be murdered.
Exactly. If she kills herself, murders herself, like all the same things apply.
Exactly. And obviously, when something does happen on a cruise ship, like, it's not like the two people or however many people are involved in that incident are in a vacuum all of the sudden, right?
Right.
They're there with everybody else just like they have been the whole time.
Right, and now you're trapped with your. If you do commit a murder on a cruise ship, you're now trapped on the cruise ship, and you still got the murder victim laying there.
Exactly. And it's amazing to me because I do realize, I do understand why a family, like we were talking about earlier, I understand the sort of the idea that they want to not believe that their loved one ended up in the ocean.
Right.
And I get that, right? I really do. And I probably couldn't look a family in the face and be mean about it, right?
Right.
But you're ignoring a lot of logical steps to think that not only did something else happen, that like either nobody saw anything or that every single person that saw something doesn't care enough about your loved one to not speak up.
Yeah, and that gets weird because, like,
It does, because it doesn't make, especially this is not a guest. This is a cast member. And so that means it wasn't just like, she knew these people. She was having to live with these people, right? While she's working on this cruise ship. And so anybody that knew anything, of course they would speak up unless they get thrown in too far in the conspiracy world. And then they're like, I'm not getting involved in that stuff, right?
Right.
Because it's so outlandish. But it's so incredibly sad. Now, granted, I would be the person who's like, oh, well, my loved one clearly died because they disappeared while they were on a cruise ship in the ocean, right?
Yeah.
And then my loved one would be the person something had happened to, right? Like besides just falling off into the ocean. Now, it seems to me, and I don't know if you've noticed this trend or not, the, cruise ship mafia, which is like the captain, apparently in these stories, right? They always give the family an out.
Yeah.
And the out is they accidentally fell.
Yeah.
Right? And the family never takes that. They never say,
well,
oh, yeah, they accidentally fell. Because, see, the alternative isn't that she got carted off in a suitcase because somebody killed her. The alternative is she had either a crappy night or she had, like, major depression and she committed suicide.
Right.
And have you noticed that?
Yeah, I've noticed it.
The captains follow the logical chain of things here. Now, did a rogue wave wash her off of the boat? Well, we don't know. And actually, to me, that sounds a little far-fetched to give the family an out.
It does. I was going to say the rogue wave is almost as statistically improbable as the rest of it.
Well, and so where's the video of the rogue wave?
Okay. That's how we end up here today, is you and I asking these questions.
So, they all just pay attention next time something like somebody goes missing on a cruise ship that clearly something happened, right?
Right.
Now, there used to be alarms.
Yes.
I don't know if they still exist. I don't know if they existed at this point in time or not. A crew member clearly might know a way around an alarm. I don't know the dynamics that go into a cruise ship suicide because, like, nobody ever says, yes, it was a suicide, right?
Wait, pause.
I don't know what the dynamics of a cruise ship suicide entail because, like, it never gets, like, nobody ever says, this person is missing and clearly they jumped.
Right, because they don't want to publicize that and have it happen again.
Well, plus there's so many intriguing things that can occur in between there. And like, again, the escape room of missing persons cases, because it's not just like, where are they? You have to get creative with it.
Yeah.
And it defies logic to believe your loved one made it from the cruise ship to Venice with no trail in between. And yet they're willing to believe that.
Yes.
Right? And so that shows you that they're just looking for hope. And it's a way to tell yourself your loved one didn't die alone in the ocean.
Right.
Because if I'm being honest, that is probably the scariest way I've ever thought about dying.
Yeah, it's a pretty terrible way to go.
And when they give them the accidental like thing that
Yeah.
could have occurred, it's not because I feel like it's always that suicide's the alternative. It's not like it's a murder that's the alternative. And see, if you graciously accept it and say, okay, that must be what happened. They accidentally went off the ship. There's a stigma that like you have given up on your loved one. Right?
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying. Yeah.
And that's sad because in 20 years, we're going to have another situation like the Bradleys where like the dad's like, when Amy comes home,
Right.
and that's just unlikely to happen. And so I don't know how you like balance that. Like I would love to think that, she didn't accidentally get swept off the boat, but I realize that my relationship with my loved one is strong enough that she would have found a way to let me know she was still alive.
Right.
Right. And she hasn't done that. And so I'm kind of forced to believe that something did happen along that realm. Now, there was more to this particular story that like is super dramatic, right?
Right.
I don't know if you know what all it was, but like she was in a relationship with another member of the crew or cast member or whatever you call it.
Yeah, that's what I was about to get to. Yeah.
Okay. There's like there's a lot more dynamics to it, right?
Well, there's nuances to all of this and how it gets so weird. So there's this report that's done basically stating like, we've investigated all of this and essentially the rogue wave makes sense. And the Bahamian police promised this to Rebecca's family. Rebecca's family's hired a lawyer. They're really not like focused in on the Bahamian police at that point. They're really focused on Disney and making Disney do the right thing, whatever that is. But the people that get involved include like detectives who are more on the other side of the pond. So British detectives looking at this. They are like part of this whole group of people. Like they get involved from the perspective of helping write the report. Now, the requests for these reports that exist, we know the reports actually exist. They are FOIA'd multiple times, and the FOIA requests are denied. The grounds are that it contains restricted personal information, which I'm interested in. I always want to know what the personal information is. That's not always stuff that makes it on the podcast, but that's stuff I want to know because sometimes it steers me one way or the other.
Well, I'm just kind of pointing this out. Like, a FOIA request doesn't necessarily apply to like everywhere in the world. Well, I would say this. For one thing, I don't think anything exists. Okay. Another thing is if she had been swept off by a rogue wave, I'm not sure that I don't think that they're gonna release that.
Right.
Because that could be a liability situation, possibly. I don't know. But they're certainly never going to release a crew member jumping off the boat.
That was like jumping off the boat, having a safety issue on the boat. All of those things I think aren't going to be released just in general.
Right, exactly. And like, where does it so how many people would even know about that? Like somebody that possibly saw it and then like their supervisor or something.
Right. We get some from the pseudonymous person, Melissa, and we get a little information about what's happened here. That is that the internal phone system tapes the calls. So Melissa tells John Ronson that Rebecca had been in this relationship and been having problems in this relationship, and she was very upset. It was very intense, and it was kind of toxic roller coaster type relationship. And the report is, and this is kind of backed up by this person who's talking to Ronson, but not really anything else. So is it real? We don't know. that she wasn't talking to the romantic partner. She was talking to like a go-between, and that she was upset in this phone call, and that phone call is included in the report, and the report is private because of that being in there. Don't know if that's true or not. But once she goes missing and we have the anniversaries, her parents start talking about stuff. They say they've heard the names of this young woman and this older man on the ship, and that there's this potential for a love triangle, and they don't tell us the source of this information, so it just kind of hangs there, but it makes its way into some of the local papers, and people start putting it into the summaries, and they state that like those people should come forward and tell the rest of the story. The Rebecca's family also at one point states that like they've heard through the grapevine, and probably the people they've met through this terrible tragedy for their family, that additional footage has been sent by Disney to the FBI for enhancement, but they won't tell anyone what they believe this footage might contain. I think that's all bunk, but I don't know. They also debunk the idea of suicide because, and I'll say part of this is true. They point out the fact that she's working for Disney, and Disney hires a certain type of person to be their cast members. That is true, particularly with public-facing cast members. They're usually upbeat people. They're usually happy and bubbly people, and people that are able to be kind and cheerful looking and able to be engaging with people. But the truth is that doesn't mean she's not suicidal. That just means that that's the face she puts forward.
Just because somebody doesn't seem suicidal doesn't mean that they're not.
I agree with you. And
okay, I'm not saying that everybody would commit suicide. I'm just saying that, like, at the end of the day, a lot of suicides happen by people who people say they wouldn't have committed suicide. They were so happy. And sometimes suicide works that way.
Well, they point to all this other stuff that, like, she had gotten them passes to go to Disneyland Paris with her sister, and this was supposed to be some kind of surprise, but it was in like the belongings that they're taking away from her quarters. There's
the other thing I wonder with cruise ship things is how spur of the moment it is, and how possible it would be to take back if it was possible, right?
Well, I think that you suddenly find yourself in an environment that's potentially more dangerous and injurious than a normal hotel or apartment when you're able to be on this boat on the ocean, and like you have that moment where you walk up to the edge. And I'm not saying this is a suicide. I'm just saying, because we're talking about the suicide, I do think it, like, there's certain things about it that might allow you to make the decision faster.
Right, and maybe not thought out as well, like, especially if it's an erratic moment. If alcohol is involved, I'm not saying it was involved here, but there are different factors that come into play, right?
Right.
That, like, it's not a situation where you got to, like, procure the pills you're going to take, and then you got to have a place to take them, right? You literally would walk up and jump off.
Right.
And so it's a split-second decision, right?
Right.
And I'm just saying that has to be taken into consideration in all of these situations. And I'm not saying that happened here. I'm just saying, like, how suicidal do you have to be to jump off a cruise ship? I would say it's not a lot.
Well, so they point at all these Facebook messages back and forth with the family, and they talk about it can't possibly be suicide. We have this woman who is a crew member going by the name of Melissa. She says she had seen Rebecca at 11 p.m. She thought that Rebecca did go out to the crew pool. She describes it as being a place that she really liked to go to be alone and to relax, or to be with friends. She posits this idea, and I guess this is to the family. It comes up a couple of different ways. It pops up in John Ronson's article. It pops up in a later Hollywood Reporter article about the settlement and Disney more than about Rebecca. But she posits the idea that maybe she had climbed up and was simply sitting on the wall that everybody's talking about is too high and it'll block the rogue wave. And she's sitting up there, and she describes Rebecca as a bit of a risk taker. So then we're really splitting the hairs on accident versus suicide. If she's someone who might, like, get a little bit of adrenaline from using her athletic prowess to get up and be able to see something other people can't see, and to look at the boat a different way, and something happens at that point, And she
Well,
really,
and it actually would make sense because somebody that's doing that, like, they're like, I'm never going to fall off of that. That's ridiculous, right?
right,
That's
exactly,
exactly who would do it, right?
exactly,
And so that's another out, right?
right.
It could be exactly what happened, but it's also another out. If she sat up there and accidentally fell, the issue is like that makes, that's too logical. We have to go a different route, right?
Yeah. Well, so then what happens is like the thing that like we know, you and I know can happen. The family has put out so much information, and there has been this sort of looming investigation of the escape room, which is what you described it. It's a perfect description for what happens to them. People start to take advantage of that. There's private investigators that pop up and they say, hey, looks like her clothes are too big. Those shoes that you have that were in her belongings can't possibly be hers. And they create these questions. But this case goes a step further than the normal problems that you would find. And an MP, like a member of parliament from Chester, named Chris Matheson, he like runs, he's looking for a soundbite to get his name in there. He runs with the idea that Rebecca was the victim of a crime, either a sexual assault and murder or like trafficking or something. And he ends up telling a local paper, and I think it's 2015 or 2016, like, it's obvious that something happened here. And he says that he has a copy of the original police report and that he has compelling evidence to support his claim that like this is a crime and a cover up. There's this private investigator, John Anderson, who had worked with him some and who had also worked with the family, Rebecca's family, and with Matheson, and saying that records show that the seas were normal that night, which is weird because like the whole point of a rogue wave is you don't know it's coming. And like he says that any wave that could have taken her out of the pool or off of the ship would have caused damage. There's this
Or been on video.
right. It'd been on video.
Just like any sort of sexual assault or murder would have some clues.
Correct. And there's another guy, John Prescott, who is he's a deputy prime minister at one point. He gets involved and he believes that Rebecca was thrown overboard after having been murdered, which again, where's the video? And he
Or anybody that saw it. I feel like we kind of give quite a bit of wiggle room for like in these theories of how many people would actually like cover up a murder, right?
yeah, and so it's interesting that you say that because this kind of leads towards my wrap up of this, the specific words you just said, like covering up a murder, the capability of covering up a murder, the number of people that have to be involved, particularly if you're covering up a murder that potentially either disposal of the body or the murder itself has been caught on video. Like you have to get like all these people engaged in it. And I did notice they had the perfect out here when some of the later coverage comes out. You have this lawsuit that happens and things are talked about in it. You can find it online. There's a couple of like little blogs out there about cruise law and like the law of international waters. Most of them are American based, but like those things, they seem to all like have some interesting thoughts about this undisclosed amount of money that the Rebecca's family is settling for, and that there's some kind of non-disclosure agreement where they're not going to discuss the case publicly. But the other perfect thing that happens here is they point to Disney, pointing to the Royal Bohemian Police Force, and the Royal Bohemian Police Force pointing back to Disney as like basically saying we can't, share all this stuff because there's personal information. We have laws, and Disney saying like they're the ones who are working on this. It's not really us, which I don't really believe that it's not them. But we don't actually know if additional footage exists. We don't know if like tapes of this phone call exist. We end up with some really strange stuff happening, which I don't believe is people covering up a murder. Like your description there, where you have to have so many people involved in the conspiracy for it to make sense and work. I think it's
And there's
more
just not going to be that many people to do it.
right. I think Disney looked at this and they went, oh, well, there's an accident. We're not legally required to turn over evidence of this accident. It happened in international waters. We don't want the bad publicity. We really don't want to deal with this eventually legal fallout that we're going to have going on here. So they don't participate fully with the Royal Bahamian Police Force, who gets limited information. So then it's not actually a cover-up of a murder. It's everybody's covering their own ass to save their jobs and to not, piss off their bosses because they think it's okay when they know a murder didn't happen. So,
Well, right. And that's how I sort of see it. Like especially if there is a clear cut something that occurred, right? That is literally it takes the weight of a possible crime having been committed off of everybody's shoulders that is aware of it, right?
Right.
Then they're like, well, we're not putting that out there because it would disparage, the victim here. The missing person would be disparaged.
Well, particularly if you have a security supervisor who says, we looked at the footage, we don't see her going off the boat. But then when they look at the footage, they see that the security supervisor is wrong and she's clearly bouncing off the boat on this wave. But we can't release that because it's a woman bouncing off a boat on a wave that's knocking her down. And you know what? She climbed up there to that place she's not supposed to be. So it's really her fault. It's not our fault.
Well, right. But if they saw a situation where like someone was being murdered, like they're not going to cover that up. There's just not enough people in the line of what would have to happen there that would be willing to do that. I don't think.
I think that's what happens here. I think a fall happens. I think by the time it's realized it's happened, so say that fall happens at 6 a.m. and it's 3.5 hours later. She hasn't shown up for her 9 o'clock shift. It's now 9:15, 9:30. So by the time you're doing that, you're 75 miles from where she fell off. And like,
oh yeah, like it's too. I mean, not to mention
that's assuming if you do it right then.
Well, right, but why do you immediately go to that?
You don't. You look for
Exactly.
her. You spend another 3 or 4 hours. It just happens that, say there was a crime, and this is your crime scene. Your crime scene is scooting its little tush across the ocean.
Well, right, and it's an interesting phenomenon, right?
Oh,
Because it's so contained, and yet it's also not so contained because it's one of the most non-contained contained scenes there can be.
Yep.
Because if there's something that occurs on a cruise ship, it's right there. And most of the time, there are a lot of witnesses,
Yep.
whether it's a passenger or a crew member. It's really hard to have a moment where everybody's not seeing something happen. And it's sort of illustrated earlier when the crew member said that they had the pool to relax, to stretch out and relax because they lived in such tight quarters.
Yep.
Okay. Well, the quarters were tight for the crew members. And so that means that in the event a murder occurred, that more than just the murderer would have known what was up, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, it all points. I don't know what could be. I do think that either they don't have it or they do have it, and they're. But I think anything that they have, I don't think it points to other people. They're not going to protect criminals who are killing people on their cruises.
Correct.
They're not going to do that, and they're also not going to disparage a victim who is no longer with us because of something that occurred, accidental or otherwise, right? I don't think they're not going to be like, watch this. It's just not a good look for them. And it never ends, right? Now, I don't know if her parents have settled the lawsuit that they had, and they have a non-disclosure. And was something revealed to them?
I don't know. Like and this is not the exact last line. It's the last line I read as we were putting all this together. And I realized it's the perfect last line. for the episode. Do you have anything else on this overall? Because I'm going to say this, and then we'll talk about this part, but this really is kind of interesting. It's Jim Walker. So he's an attorney based out of Florida who represents Rebecca's family in this ongoing lawsuit in the United States. His quote back in 2017, I think, I scribbled the quote down, but I apologize. I don't know where I got it. It says, "The case has been resolved. They're pursuing an inquest in the UK, but I'm not supposed to talk about the case." That, to me, says probably Disney told the parents, if you sign this agreement, we'll show you or let you listen or something that we're not releasing. And I suspect it is something weird that is completely innocuous. It could be that she was skinny dipping in the pool and climbed up a pole and fell. It could be that, like, she was all by herself and somebody came by and warned her not to be out there by herself and she did it anyways. It could be anything. But the bottom line is, I suspect that they know what happened and that it wasn't murder and it wasn't suicide. It was just a plain old accident.
Right.
So I didn't know like what the rest of your feelings might be about this, but I felt like that was a good kind of wrap up point. When I read Jim Walker saying that, like saying the case has been resolved, they're pursuing an inquest or whatever. I think that inquest maybe doesn't come from her family. I think it comes from the people trying to snag the spotlight on it.
Yeah, I don't know. And also, I don't know what that means. Like, did that just mean the lawsuit was resolved? I mean, he says the case is resolved, like, and so, we are just kind of left looming. But in situations like this, I mean, unfortunately, everybody already has the answer as to what happened to the person on the cruise ship, right?
Right.
I mean, they're in the ocean somewhere. And it sucks to have to say that so blatantly, like, I don't care. I do care. It's just, I do think the escape room of, missing people, it can get out of hand, right? As far as the narratives go. And I feel like I was saddened by some of these. I didn't realize how bad it was, I guess it would be the best way to say it. I didn't realize, that Amy Bradley's family was still waiting for her to come home.
Right.
And why is that happening? It's because of the phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
And people not being able to say, for whatever reason, your daughter died that day in the ocean.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I went, here's why I say that Jim Walker's word is probably for me the last word. They're not keeping up the website anymore.
I think that there was an answer there. I would be surprised if there wasn't. But everything is not for public consumption, right?
Correct.
And murder is something that would be for public consumption. And the fact that it's not for public consumption, it leans away from that. And I hate it for all the people who got caught up in that, right?
Yeah.
I
hate it too. But believe it or not, there is still more to come in the Overboard series. I have more stuff to tell you about. I just wanted to include her case because I find this to have a lot of similarities with Amy Lynn Bradley, although it takes place in a different time and like there's a lot of differences. But some of the similarities were just absolutely bizarre to me. So I wanted to include that here, but we will be back in the next episode with more Overboard stories because I wanted to kind of push through some of these. It's fascinating to me. And I have to say, I totally agree with your sentence and your phrase and description. Disappearances from cruise ships really are the escape room mystery of true crime.
They are, because we will go out of our way to figure out what happened to the person. when it's staring us in the face usually the whole time.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrottieCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.